I have a couple examples for you now for section 2.3 here. The first one is in terms of finding a weighted mean. You can think of this like if you have a class and they're weighting a certain percentage for these different categories. Maybe you have like tests, quizzes, classwork, final, and you have a different weighting. It's a way of trying to figure out then what your overall grade would be. So to do this, first of all, you'd want to write down what the categories are and the scores that you got for each of those categories. So in this case, I already have filled out for a particular student what they maybe got for a test, quiz, classwork, and final score. And write those down. Normally we have X represent the score. And then the weight has to do with these percentages that I have given in the problem here. So in this case, we have that tests are worth 30% of the grade. So we change that to a decimal. Remember to do that. You move the decimal point to the left 2 places, or you can divide it by 100. Either way, you'll get the same thing. So there we'd get 0.3 as a decimal. Quizzes are 15% in this case, so it'd be 0.15. Classwork is also 15%, so another 0.15, and then the final is 40%, which would be 0.4. And then you add up those weights there. So if I add up the weights in this particular case, it adds up to 1. And then what we do next is we need to then multiply together the scores and the weights. So in this case, for the first value, I'll put it in parentheses as a reminder for the first one, we do the 70. And then we multiply that times the 0.3. So for this first one here, we get 21. And the next one, we do the 82 times 0.15. Once again, we multiply those together. That's what the XW at the top there means. So in that case there, we'd get 12.3. Same sort of thing for the next one. We do 90 times 0.15. I get 13.5. 65 times 0.4 to get 26. And then, once again, we add those up. That's what the little squiggle thing kind of looks like. A capital E is in front of that XW. It means you're adding up the values in that column. So if we add those up, we get 72.8. And in general, then, to finish finding your weighted mean, what you need to do there is you do what you get for this answer here. That's 72.8. And then we divide that by the sum of your weighted means. So in this case, if we add up the weighted means, the summation of your W column there was 1. So in this particular case, it just stays the same. So then you get 72.8 as your final answer there for your weighted mean. So in other words, this student in this case would have ended up with a 72.8% for their overall score there. So that would be in terms of finding a weighted mean. And then for this next example here, we're finding the mean, median, and mode from a frequency distribution. I know most of you are probably used to finding mean, median, and mode using a list of numbers instead. But sometimes you're also going to go through and find it using a frequency distribution. So to do this, again, you want to set up what the midpoints are of each of your classes, and then the frequencies. And then to calculate n is your sample size. And to find that, once again, you add up your frequencies. So if we add up our frequencies in this case, we get 29. So our sample size is 29. That means that there were originally 29 values to begin with for this set of data. And then what we do is we multiply together our class midpoints and the frequencies. So it's similar to what we just did for the last example. We'll have a few changes since we're not dealing with weights here, but we're dealing with frequencies. So we multiply together our midpoint and frequency. So for the first one, we get 150 if we do 25 times 6. If we do 35 times 8, we get 280. If we do the 45 times 3, we get 135. 55 times 10, we get 550. And 65 times 2, we get 130. Once again, the symbol here means that you're adding up your values in that column. It's your summation symbol. So you're adding them up. So if we add those up there, we get 1,245. And keep in mind, for both of these examples, and in general for any of these problems, your tables are not going to be already given to you. They might give you a portion of it, for instance, like the midpoints and frequencies perhaps for a problem. But then you're going to need to remember what you need to include to figure out the rest of the problem. So it'd be a good idea to make sure that you're writing down notes in terms of how to find these values whenever you're going through these videos. So here, for your mean, to finish that up here, what we'll need to do is we'll do what we got for our answer here, the summation of x times f, and divide it by our n. So let's write that out here. So we're going to have our mean equal to what we get whenever we add up, so our summation of our x and f, our midpoint and frequency in this case, divided by n. And remember to find n, another way of thinking of that, and remember it's the summation of your frequency column. So another way of finding that. So in this case, we do the 1,245 divided by 29. And here, if we round that, so we get approximately 42.93 for the mean of that data, or your average. And then the median here, remember median means the middle number. It's a little bit trickier in this case rather than if you have a list. You're going to have to figure out, first of all, what your location of the median is. So in other words, where it's going to be located, what position in the data. So the location of your median, to figure that out, what we're going to need to do is do your sample size, which remember is your n, plus 1, and then divided by 2 to figure out the location of your median. So in this case, we do the 29 plus 1, which gives us 30, divided by 2, which gives us 15. So what that means is that our median is in the 15th position. So in other words, if you had the list of numbers listed out, it would be the 15th value from the bottom or from the top, either way. Keep in mind that if it ended up being decimal, if it was, for instance, 14.5 instead, it would be between the 14th and the 15th number. So then you'd have to do the average of those two instead. So to figure that out from your frequency distribution, where this 15th value is at, we need to look at our frequencies. So here, for instance, if we look at our first two, we have a frequency of 6 and 8. If we added those together, we'd have 14 there. So we're still not to the 15th one yet. If we add on the next frequency, if we add on another 3, then we'd be at 17. So what that means is that this class here, the class that has 45 as the midpoint, is going to be your median in this case. So whenever we're writing out our median from our frequency distribution, what we're doing is we're looking for that position first of all, and then we use the midpoint value for the median. And then the mode is pretty easy to find actually from a frequency distribution. It's just whatever class has the highest frequency. So in this case, if we look at our values, the one that has the highest frequency is the one that has the midpoint of 55. Because the frequency of 10 is the highest. So our mode in this case would be 55 using the frequency distribution. And that's what we're going to go over for this section. Make sure, like normal, if you have questions on anything in the video or anything else, you can definitely ask in class. Or you can stop by my office hours sometime and we can go through more that way as well.